What do you do when the father of your unborn child mocks your pain while holding hands with someone else? What if the betrayal that nearly broke you became the very fire that rebuilt you? Evelyn Campbell thought she had it all: a rising career, a home full of dreams, and a husband who once promised forever. But everything shattered the moment she caught him laughing at her growing belly, with another woman on his arm. Humiliated, heartbroken, pregnant, and alone, Evelyn stood at the edge of collapse. But what her husband didn't know was that he wasn't burying her. He was planting something fierce. Because from courtroom humiliation to boardroom triumph, from postpartum pain to entrepreneurial power, Evelyn didn't just survive, she rose. Now, the question isn't whether she made it, it's how far she climbed, and what she became when no one thought she could. What would you do if your lowest moment became your greatest turning point? Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Shining Stories for more powerful journeys of resilience and self-worth. Now let's begin. They say betrayal hits hardest when it comes from the one you once trusted most, especially when it's wrapped in laughter that isn't yours. Meet Evelyn Moore, a quiet soul with a sharp mind, who once believed her life was built on love and loyalty. But everything unraveled the moment she walked into the room and heard her husband Graham, the man she'd shared her dreams with, laughing at her growing belly. In front of his mistress, not in whispers, not in shame, but boldly right there in the home they had built, room by room, hand in hand. What Graham didn't know, what he never cared to see, was that the woman he ridiculed was far from weak. Evelyn Moore was a storm in waiting. In a courtroom thick with tension, the world would soon learn that the woman he tried to break was already rising, not just as a survivor, but as a CEO, a mother, and a force he could never contain. But long before the titles and headlines, there was a girl raised in a simple farmhouse just outside Henderson, Ohio. Her parents, Samuel and Grace Bennett, owned a tiny roadside cafe, nothing fancy, but every corner told a story of hard work, long nights, and quiet dignity. They didn't teach Evelyn to chase riches. They taught her to live with purpose, to be kind, even when kindness wasn't returned. That grounding shaped her. It was during her junior year at Hamilton University when she first met Graham Moore. He was the kind of guy who entered a room like he owned the air in it, charming, clever, and full of promises. Graham came from Newport Beach, born into wealth and surrounded by expectation. He moved through life with the ease of someone who'd never had to choose between paying rent or fixing the car. But there was something about Evelyn's quiet strength that intrigued him, and something about Graham's ambition that she mistook for passion. She didn't see the hunger behind his eyes, the one that confused love with leverage. Still, she believed him. When he said he'd build a life with her, she took it to heart. They married young, filled with big dreams and borrowed time. Evelyn took a job as a marketing coordinator at a small but promising agency called Silverline & Co. Meanwhile, Graham bounced between ventures: real estate today, a wellness startup tomorrow, always talking about the next big break. When a new opportunity took them to Seattle, Evelyn stepped up, securing a senior role at Wesley & Byrne, a leading firm in the region. She worked long hours, brought in high-value clients, and paid most of the bills. Graham, he brought home ideas. But somewhere along the way, the man who once said she could be anything began to resent her for becoming it. He mocked her workload, belittled her salary, and questioned whether she was wife enough. Then came the day that cracked something inside her for good. Her father, her anchor, died suddenly of a heart attack. Evelyn was shattered, but Graham barely blinked. No words of comfort, just bitterness over the size of the inheritance. That was the moment she first wondered, what if the man I married was never really on my side? That day, something inside Evelyn began to shift. Her heart still clung to love, but her trust in Graham, it had cracked. And cracks never stay small for long. The years that followed moved like a blur, long hours at work, strategy sessions, and silent dinners at home. She kept climbing the ladder at Wesley & Byrne, while Graham drifted deeper into his world of promises and pitch decks. The warmth that once lived between them slowly turned cold. When Grace, Evelyn's mother, came to stay for a while, hoping to ease her daughter's load, she noticed it immediately. Graham barely acknowledged her presence, treating her like an unwanted guest in his own home. One afternoon, as they sipped tea by the kitchen window, Grace gently placed her hand over Evelyn's and said, "Sweetheart, I don't like how he looks at you. There's something missing in his eyes." But Evelyn, ever hopeful, shook her head. "He's just stressed. It'll pass." Then came the day that changed everything. Her calendar reminded her of a strange delay. Days turned to weeks. A single test confirmed what she hadn't dared to hope she was pregnant. She stood in the hallway, hands trembling, clutching the tiny white stick in a growing sense of wonder. Despite all the cracks, she thought, maybe this could bring us back. That evening, she wrapped the pregnancy test in tissue, placed it inside a velvet box, along with a pair of soft, knitted baby shoes. She lit a candle and waited by the door. When Graham came home, he was grumbling about traffic, some botched latte, and an annoying investor call. Evelyn handed him the box, her heart pounding against her ribs. He opened it, paused, frowned, then silence. No joy, no laughter, just a heavy sigh and a furrowed brow. "You should have said something earlier," he muttered, eyes avoiding hers. "Are we even ready for this financially?" Her smile faltered. She swallowed the sting and whispered, "We'll figure it out. Together." But together was becoming a distant dream. Over the following weeks, Graham grew colder. He left earlier, came home later. His phone rarely left his hand, and when it buzzed, he'd turn away to answer. Conversations became battles, money, investors, new opportunities. Evelyn, now carrying life inside her, felt more alone than ever. One night, long past midnight, she sat on the edge of their bed, wide awake, the glow from the nursery nightlight barely illuminating the soft pastel walls. Graham still hadn't returned. She called. Voicemail. She tried to keep busy folding onesies, rearranging books, but the knot in her chest only tightened. At 1:57, the door finally opened. He reeked of wine and perfume she didn't recognize. She asked where he'd been. "Meeting," he mumbled, brushing past her. But Evelyn saw what he didn't bother to hide, a lipstick stain, bright as fire, resting just beneath his collar. Still, she told herself, don't assume, don't accuse, find the truth. A week later, while sorting laundry, she found a folded paper in his jacket pocket, a credit card receipt. Her eyes caught the words, Linden and Ivy, 8:30 p.m., party of 2. And beneath that, a name scribbled by hand, Ava Whitmore. Her heart raced. She knew the name, an influencer, often featured in society pages, a woman known for lavish tastes and very public affairs. Evelyn searched the restaurant online, candlelit booths, a live string quartet, private rooftop seating, a place for lovers, not colleagues. She waited that evening for Graham to return, and when he did, she was ready, holding the receipt in one hand and her unraveling hope in the other. She asked, quietly, who is Ava? Graham's eyes narrowed, his voice laced with mockery. "Oh, so now you're checking my receipts," he snapped. "Maybe you should worry less about my money and more about keeping yourself calm for the baby's sake." Those words hit harder than any slap. My private life is my business. They echoed through Evelyn's mind like a cruel joke. She looked around their once cozy living room, the soft couch, the family photos, the baby blanket draped over a chair, and felt like a stranger in her own home. Love didn't live here anymore, only silence and lies, unable to carry the weight alone. Evelyn turned to the only person she trusted, her colleague and longtime friend, Julia Bennett. Julia was the creative director at Wesley & Byrne, fierce in the boardroom, but warm and intuitive where it mattered most. They met for lunch at a small cafe near the office. Evelyn stirred her tea with shaking hands, her voice barely above a whisper. Julia listened, quiet, present, unwavering. "You have to protect yourself now," she said gently, pushing her plate aside. "For you, and for the baby. You've been giving him chances. Evelyn, maybe it's time you gave one to yourself." It was Julia who first told her about Ava Whitmore, Graham's so-called business associate. But whispers around town painted a clearer picture. Ava wasn't just a socialite from Cambridge, she was a headline hunter, a woman who collected attention like designer handbags. And Graham, he fit right into her world of flash and fantasy. Evelyn couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, she confronted him. "If you don't walk away from her," she said, voice steady but soft, "then I'm walking away from you." Graham didn't flinch. "Where would you even go?" he scoffed. "You're pregnant. Evelyn, you think you can handle this alone? You won't last without me." The chill in his voice, it was colder than any winter. Evelyn did her best to focus on the growing life inside her, but the stress was eroding her from the inside out. At her next checkup, Dr. Lena Cartwright, her obstetrician, looked at her with concern. "Your blood pressure's too high," the doctor warned. "You need rest and peace, not chaos." But how could she find peace when her husband was parading his mistress in broad daylight that weekend? Graham told her he had an emergency meeting with investors. Something in Evelyn's gut twisted. She called for a cab, kept her distance, and followed him silently. The taxi pulled up outside the Hargrave Hotel, where a black-tie charity gala was in full swing. She slipped past the velvet ropes, her breath shallow, and then she saw them. Graham, Ava, tucked into a dimly lit corner, whispering, laughing. His hand rested on hers as if they belonged to each other. Then he leaned in to kiss her. Evelyn's heart thundered. She walked straight up to them, each step a declaration of self-worth. Graham turned, not in guilt but annoyance. Ava looked her over with a smirk. "Oh, so this is the wife," she said, like Evelyn was a footnote. Before Evelyn could speak, Graham waved her off. "Don't make a scene." "Evelyn, you're embarrassing yourself." Then, with a venom-laced chuckle, he turned to a group nearby. "Yeah, she's pregnant, but let's be honest. She can barely afford to take care of herself, let alone a kid." Ava laughed with him. Evelyn stood frozen, every eye in the room suddenly on her. Heat crawled up her neck. Shame, rage, heartbreak, but above all else, clarity. She turned and walked out, tears carving lines down her face. Her dignity crumpled, but not gone. She knew in that moment this wasn't just betrayal. It was a declaration of war on her worth. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry for what you went through. You deserve better. He's not worth it." No name, no follow-up, just those words. But they wrapped around her like a balm. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn exhaled. Maybe someone saw her. Maybe someone understood. But more importantly, maybe it was time she saw herself again. Exhausted, but not broken. Evelyn found herself once again seated across from Julia at their usual cafe, a quiet spot tucked behind the office, where hope had room to breathe. As the waitress refilled their cups, Julia leaned forward, her tone soft but resolute. "Eve, you're brilliant. You know that, right? The way you pitch, the way you lead. You've got everything it takes to run your own firm. You don't need Graham, not his name, not his approval, and definitely not his money." Evelyn stirred her coffee slowly, her mind turning over an old dream she'd long buried beneath sacrifice and second-guessing. She had once imagined opening her own agency where vision mattered more than politics, where her ideas wouldn't be filtered through someone else's ego. But life had always gotten in the way. Family, obligations, and a husband who never saw her as more than his supporting act. Still, Julia's words struck a chord, and just like that, a forgotten ember inside her sparked to life. That very evening, fate nudged that ember into a flame. Her phone rang. A familiar name lit up the screen. Dr. Walter Lane, her old marketing professor. "I've got someone you should meet," he said warmly. "A former student of mine, Colin Hayes, is launching a new tech startup. He's looking for high-level marketing strategy. And I immediately thought of you." Colin was the founder of Bluefield Labs, a rising name in mobile app development with serious investor backing. They weren't just looking for help. They were offering a seat at the table and a very generous paycheck to match. Evelyn hesitated only briefly. With Julia's encouragement echoing in her mind, she began consulting for Bluefield in the evenings. Her days were still filled with her full-time job, but her nights, they belonged to her dreams. She dove into it, drafting messaging frameworks, outlining launch campaigns, designing brand identities with the precision of a woman who had been silenced too long and was ready to speak. Graham didn't notice, or rather, he didn't care. His focus was elsewhere, wrapped up in Ava's curated world of cocktails, photo ops, and illusion. Meanwhile, Evelyn was quietly building something real. Every consulting check she earned, she deposited into a private account, not to hide, to prepare. Then came the call that would change everything. "Evelyn," Colin said during a video meeting one Friday afternoon, "our investors were blown away by your work. We want you to come on board full-time as our chief marketing officer. You'd have full autonomy and equity." Her breath caught. She was still pregnant, still married, still walking a tightrope of fear and fatigue. But the offer, it wasn't just a job, it was a door. Colin continued, "Look, we know what we've got in you, and we're not afraid of betting on it." Something in her shifted, something solid. She looked at her reflection in the laptop screen and whispered, "Yes." That evening, over a quiet dinner at home, Evelyn gathered her courage and told Graham about the offer. She waited, hoping perhaps foolishly for even a glimmer of support. Instead, he laughed. "Startup tech. Please, you're being used and you don't even see it. You're too soft for that world." But Evelyn didn't argue. She simply smiled, and in that smile was a quiet vow. "This is the last time you'll underestimate me." She walked away from the table, returned to her room, and began organizing her exit. Slowly, carefully, not just from the house, from him. The days that followed were laced with tension. Graham flaunted Ava more boldly now, posting photos of weekend getaways, luxury dinners, and rooftop views as if daring Evelyn to react. She didn't, because while he was performing for the world, she was preparing for something real. The pictures started surfacing little by little. Graham never tagged Ava, but the implication was clear, lavish brunches, rooftop sunsets, matching drinks and crystal glasses. Friends noticed. They asked Evelyn careful, tiptoeing questions. She'd just smile, offer vague answers, then change the subject. She wouldn't let the world see her bleeding, but behind the poised exterior, she was burning. At Bluefield Labs, Evelyn buried herself in work. Campaign after campaign turned heads, tech blogs raved. Mainstream media started calling. Investors praised her as a visionary. And Colin Hayes, the founder himself, began to drop hints, soft, subtle ones about a bigger role, a much bigger role, something bold, something game-changing. CEO of a new spinoff. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt momentum beneath her feet. And this time, she wasn't being pulled along. She was steering. Meanwhile, Graham still lived in delusion. He dismissed her work with a smirk. "It's just a startup," he'd mutter. But one night, that illusion shattered. He came home reeking of whiskey. His face was flushed, eyes bloodshot. Ava had apparently complained he wasn't delivering on the life he promised. No yachts, no headlines, no fairy tale. So he brought that bitterness home. Evelyn was at the kitchen table, deep in launch prep for a new product line. Her laptop open, documents spread neatly in front of her. Graham stormed in, slammed the cabinet shut so hard the plates rattled. "You spend all day at that joke of a job," he barked. "Look at this place. You think this is how a mother should live." Evelyn rose slowly, her voice firm and even. "I'm doing what's right for me and for this child. If that bothers you, that's your problem." He let out a cold, bitter laugh. "Our child. You honestly think you can do this on your own? You need me." He stepped toward her, anger flashing in his eyes. For a second, she felt the air shift. Her chest tightened. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Colin Hayes. Investor update. Urgent. The moment broke. Graham scoffed and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Evelyn sank back into her chair, her hands trembling. But she knew. In her bones, the fear ends now. From that night forward, she began documenting everything, every outburst, every veiled threat, every absence. She even captured screenshots of Graham's social media, a carefully curated show of wealth and fantasy, starring him and Ava. Julia, ever her quiet warrior, urged her to seek legal help, and so she did. She met with Caroline Pierce, a respected family attorney at Pearson Walker LLP. Caroline had a reputation smart, tough, and unwavering in her defense of women who had been made to feel small. Evelyn sat across from her, hands clasped tight, voice raw. Caroline listened. She didn't interrupt. When Evelyn finished, Caroline looked her straight in the eyes. "The safety of you and your baby comes first," she said. "If it comes to it, we'll get a restraining order. But first, we build your case." Quietly, thoroughly. Evelyn explained her new role, her rising salary, the stock options, the plan to move out once she secured a new place. Caroline nodded. "We'll handle everything discreetly. But you need to stay alert. People like your husband, they don't like losing control." Evelyn promised to be careful, but secrets have a way of slipping through cracks. One afternoon, Graham found a letter addressed to her, a bank statement she'd forgotten to lock away. The numbers stunned him. A 5-figure deposit. Her name, a bank he'd never seen before. His face turned pale, then red, then twisted with rage. He had no idea what was coming, but Evelyn did, and this time, she would be ready. The moment Graham spotted the bank statement from Bluefield Labs, his face twisted with fury. "You really think you can squirrel away money behind my back?" he growled, waving the paper like a weapon. "Who do you think you are?" Evelyn didn't flinch. She stood slowly, locking eyes with him, not in fear, but in calm defiance. "I'm someone who's done being stepped on, and I'm building a life, one that doesn't need your permission." He stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman standing there, as if, all this time, he'd believed she couldn't stand on her own. He let out a bitter chuckle, then stormed out of the room. But Evelyn didn't chase him, because in that one brief exchange, she'd taken something back, her voice, her power, and for the first time in a long while, her peace. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows of her small condo. She sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of work documents and folded baby clothes. Her belly, heavy now, pressed softly against the table's edge. The child inside her stirred gentle kicks, reminding her he was near, real, waiting. She placed a hand over her stomach and whispered, "We're almost there." The days had blurred into long, breathless nights, late calls, strategy meetings, her career climbing fast, her marriage crumbling faster. Each step forward felt like dragging her feet through wet concrete, but she kept moving. Then her phone buzzed. A name lit the screen, Colin Hayes. She wasn't expecting a call. She hesitated, answered, "Evelyn." His voice came low and steady. "Can you meet me at the office today in person?" An hour later, she sat across from him in the Bluefield boardroom, holding a thermos of lukewarm decaf coffee, hands slightly trembling. The air in the room was different, focused. Colin, usually lighthearted, looked serious, like something big was about to land. "I'll be direct," he said, fingers steepled on the table. "Your work has been outstanding. You've taken our brand to the next level. Our investors are beyond impressed." He paused. "We're launching a new division, and we want you to lead it. As CEO." The words seemed to hang in the air like mist. CEO. Evelyn blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. "You want me to run it?" she asked, slowly. The title tasted foreign in her mouth, ambitious and beautiful. Colin nodded with quiet conviction. "Yes. You don't just execute. You lead. You inspire people. Evelyn, this company needs someone like you at the helm." Her throat tightened. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Not since before Graham. Not since before she'd started silencing herself just to keep the peace. She glanced down at her belly, protective instinct rising. "I'm pregnant. I'll be a single mom. I'm scared. What if I can't balance it all?" Colin leaned forward, his voice gentler now. "Your pregnancy doesn't make you weaker. Evelyn, it shows your strength. You've built all this while carrying new life. That's not something we're afraid of. That's something we admire. And in that moment, with his words echoing in the quiet room, Evelyn felt the fear begin to loosen its grip. You don't have to decide today, Colin said gently. The announcement can wait until after the baby. But I needed you to know we see you, and we believe in you. For a moment, Evelyn couldn't speak. Her hand instinctively rose to cover her mouth as a wave of emotion surged through her: gratitude, fear, and something she hadn't felt in years: validation. For so long, her dreams had been treated as distractions. She had been told to quiet her ambitions, to shrink so someone else could feel bigger. And now, someone was offering her the keys to a future she thought had slipped away for good. Tears fell silently, without shame. I'll do it, she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm inside. I'll accept. Colin smiled. Then let's build something remarkable. That night, Evelyn stood at her window, looking out over the city skyline. Lights twinkled like stars fallen to earth. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She was rising. Graham didn't know it yet. But the woman he had tried to break, she was already becoming someone the world would remember. One breath, one heartbeat, one decision at a time. Soon, she wouldn't just be Evelyn. She'd be CEO Evelyn Bennett. But Graham wasn't about to let her go without a final blow. During her 8th month of pregnancy, Evelyn returned home one last time to gather the last of her belongings. She opened the front door to find him waiting, smug and lounging on the couch, Ava beside him, her legs crossed, her grin sharp as glass. You really think you get to walk away from me? Scot-free, Graham sneered. Ava and I are getting married once the papers are through. And guess what? You won't be walking away with much. My father's lawyer eats people like you for breakfast. Ava giggled and added, Oh, and don't take it too personally. Graham told me your baby wasn't even planned. Her words, soaked in cruelty, sliced like paper cuts. But Evelyn didn't flinch, didn't fire back, didn't stoop. She picked up her suitcase, turned to face Graham one last time, and said, calmly, I hope you're proud of the man you've chosen to be. One day, you'll understand what you lost. And with that, she closed the door on him and the life that had tried to contain her. Her new apartment was simple, a quiet contrast to the tense, over-decorated home she left behind. Here, there was room to breathe. Every day, she prepared for the baby's arrival, and every night, she worked to secure the future they both deserved. Julia came by, often helping build the crib, folding newborn onesies and filling the silence with warm stories and laughter that eased the ache. On a clear spring afternoon, Evelyn met with Carolyn, her attorney, to file for divorce. The paperwork felt heavy in her hands, but her heart was steady. It was time. Caroline was confident. With Evelyn's stable job, clean finances, and documented proof of Graham's mistreatment, their case was solid. But Graham, never one to surrender quietly, hired Travis Monroe, a slick, media-hungry lawyer known for turning courtrooms into theater. He filed a countersuit. They challenged everything: spousal support, custody, even Evelyn's mental fitness. They painted her as unstable, overwhelmed, and incapable of raising a child on her own. When Evelyn read the allegations, her hands trembled, but she didn't panic. She had spent months preparing. Every email, every message, every bank statement, proof, truth, strength, and she wasn't backing down. The court date was set just weeks away. Tension simmered like a storm cloud, but Evelyn remained steady. She rehearsed daily with Caroline, her attorney. No dramatics, no mudslinging, just the truth. But life, as it often does, had other plans. At exactly 36 weeks pregnant, Evelyn woke in the early hours with a sharp pain ripping through her lower abdomen. Her breath caught. Another wave hit. This wasn't stress. It was labor, alone in her apartment. She gripped the countertop, trying to stay calm. Her phone slipped once before she finally reached it. Julia. She gasped. I think it's happening. Julia was there in minutes, panic in her eyes, but calm in her hands as she dialed 911. At St. Vincent's Hospital, Everything blurred into flashing lights, brisk nurses, and the sound of Evelyn's own heartbeat in her ears. Hours later, between exhaustion and adrenaline, her world stilled. A baby's cry pierced the room. He was here, her son. She named him Noah, tiny, early, but strong. The doctors kept him in the neonatal unit for observation. His lungs were holding. His vitals were steady. Graham never showed up. Not a text, not a call. Nothing. Later, Evelyn would learn that Ava had told him not to go. "She's using the baby to trap you," Ava reportedly sneered. So he stayed away. And for Evelyn, that silence was all the confirmation she needed. This man, this ghost in designer shoes, was not the kind of father she wanted her son to know. When Noah was finally cleared to go home, Julia had the apartment-ready bassinet in place, drawers labeled, even diapers sorted by size. The nights that followed were blurry and raw. Breastfeeding was painful. Sleep came in fragments, but Evelyn held on. Each tiny milestone, each sigh, each yawn, each fluttering eyelid was a victory. Caroline suggested postponing the court hearing. "You have every right," she said. "They'll understand." But Graham's lawyer, the ever-aggressive Travis Monroe, insisted on moving forward. They hoped Evelyn would be too tired, too scattered, too fragile to fight. They were wrong. 3 weeks after giving birth, she walked into Fairfield County Courthouse, her posture tall, her eyes clear. Noah was safe at home with Julia. Evelyn's palms sweated slightly as she stepped into the courtroom. To her left, Graham sat smug in a navy suit, Ava draped over his arm like a prop, all pearls and poison. Travis Monroe flipped through his notes with a grin of rehearsed confidence. Then Bennett versus Bennett. The bailiff called. Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped forward. The judge, Honorable Miriam Clark, was known for her sharp mind and zero tolerance for manipulation. She adjusted her glasses and nodded for the hearing to begin. Caroline presented the case methodically, calm, clear, powerful. She outlined Graham's infidelity, his neglect, his total absence during Evelyn's labor. She spoke of Evelyn's new job, her rising income, and the strong support system around her. Evelyn handed over folders documented nights Graham hadn't come home, credit card statements from late-night lounges, and photos of him parading Ava through charity galas like Evelyn never existed. Then Travis rose. He didn't attack the facts. He attacked her. He claimed Evelyn was emotionally unstable. He brought up postpartum fatigue as a weakness. He painted Graham as a man who just wanted what's best for the child, a life of luxury, of comfort, of stability. A child, he said, deserves to be raised in a home with financial strength and emotional structure. But Judge Clark didn't blink. She turned slightly toward Evelyn, her expression unreadable, and the truth was only just beginning to unfold. "Significant financial resources," Caroline repeated, her voice cool and measured. "Are we speaking of Graham Bennett's actual income, or the wealth of his father?" She let the question hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "My client has built her career with her own 2 hands. She is not here relying on legacy money or family favors. She's earned her success." Still, Graham took the stand with the confidence of a man convinced by his own version of the truth. He claimed Evelyn had shut him out, that she was distant, too focused on her job to be a good partner. He painted himself as the overlooked husband neglected, misunderstood. Then, with reckless gall, he dropped a poisonous hint. "Well, there's no real proof the child is even mine." A gasp swept through the courtroom. The judge's expression didn't shift much, but her eyebrows rose, just slightly. "Do you have any evidence to support that accusation, Mr. Bennett?" she asked, her voice sharp. "No," Graham muttered, eyes lowering, "just suspicion." The judge frowned. When it was Evelyn's turn, she stood without shaking. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't retaliate. She simply told the truth. She described how Graham dismissed her pregnancy like it was an inconvenience, how he humiliated her in public, how he paraded Ava around like a trophy while she was fighting through labor alone. She offered timelines, documents, receipts, no attacks, no insults, only facts. The judge leaned forward, her gaze softening ever so slightly as Evelyn finished. For the first time in that courtroom, silence felt sacred. "Then," without warning. Travis Monroe, Graham's lawyer, rose with a smug glint in his eye. Your Honor, we'd like to call Ava Whitmore to the stand. A murmur stirred in the gallery. Evelyn's chest tightened, not out of fear, but fatigue. She was tired of the games, the distractions, the performance. Ava strutted to the front of the room like it was a fashion show. Her heels echoed on the marble floor. She was wrapped in designer confidence, with a rehearsed smile and a tilt of the head that said, "Watch me work." She sat, crossed her legs, and began. "Graham saved me," she cooed. "I was in a toxic place. He gave me love, stability, everything Evelyn didn't." She spun stories how Evelyn was cold, unaffectionate, emotionally closed off, how Graham had no choice but to find warmth elsewhere. Caroline rose instantly. "Your Honor, this testimony has no legal bearing on child custody or financial arrangements." But the judge allowed Ava to continue briefly, and it didn't take long for the performance to fall apart. What began as dramatic flair quickly descended into petty complaints. She never smiled. Ava whined. She was always so stiff. I mean, no wonder Graham felt alone. The judge's expression turned unreadable again, still, but not blank. And then came the question that turned the air electric. "Miss Whitmore," the judge asked, her tone casual but deliberate, "are you aware of Mrs. Bennett's current professional position?" Ava blinked. Professional position. "Yes. Her job," Ava laughed, clearly dismissive. "She works at some little marketing place. I think." Why the judge didn't answer. She turned to Evelyn. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "would you mind informing the court of your current role?" A hush fell. Even the paper rustling stopped. Evelyn took a breath, sat tall, and answered clearly, "I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Bluefield Labs, and as of last month, I've been appointed CEO of our newly launched division, Bluefield Creative." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Ava stiffened, her smirk cracking. Graham sat up straighter, disbelief flashing across his face. Travis scrambled through his notes, as if searching for some contradiction that didn't exist. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She wasn't just surviving this anymore. She was owning it. She spoke with elegance. She spoke with poison. Ava twisted every word like a blade, peeling back layers of falsehood coated in charm. But the courtroom wasn't buying it, not entirely. And Judge Clark? She didn't interrupt. She didn't scowl. But her eyes narrowed, slightly like someone piecing together a puzzle from between the lines. Ava's story began to shift, from accusations to complaints, from facts to opinions. Her tone, her coldness, her lack of feminine softness. This wasn't testimony anymore. It was theater, and the act was falling apart. The silence deepened. Then it rippled. Graham stiffened. His expression faltered. His lips parted like he'd misheard, like the world had flipped upside down. Ava's confidence cracked her poise, evaporating into stunned disbelief. Travis Monroe began flipping frantically through his files, as if a piece of paper might suddenly refute what had just been said. But Evelyn sat still. No tremor, no fear. Judge Clark leaned in. "CEO," she repeated, her voice tinged with interest. "Do you have supporting documentation?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I brought the offer letter, just in case." She handed it forward firmly, confidently, no trembling hands. Not anymore. The judge reviewed it silently. Each page turned with quiet purpose. Then she looked up, and a faint smile, subtle but unmistakable, touched the edge of her lips. Not amusement, not surprise, but recognition. Respect. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "your accomplishments are commendable. They speak not only to your professional excellence, but to your ability to provide a secure, thriving environment for your child." Evelyn felt her throat tighten, not because of the compliment, but because she remembered what it had cost her to get here. The nights she cried into her pillow, the mornings she woke to silence, the doubts, the bruises no one could see. And now, she was no longer surviving. She was seen. Across the courtroom, Graham looked hollow. The same man who once laughed at her paycheck, who called her dreams naive, who claimed she'd never make it without him, now sat frozen in a suit that no longer fit his arrogance. Evelyn didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The truth stood tall in the room, and all eyes finally turned to him. His shoulders tensed, his jaw twitched, because for the first time, Graham Bennett realized the woman he'd tried to diminish was now standing in a place he could only dream of reaching. And there was no going back. The moment hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Ava's mask cracked first. "Wait, CEO," she blurted, spinning toward Graham. "You told me she was barely getting by." Her voice echoed through the courtroom like an uninvited guest. Graham shot her a panicked look and hissed, "Keep your voice down," but it was too late. The illusion, carefully crafted, smugly maintained, was unraveling in front of everyone. Caroline rose with quiet control, seizing the moment. "Your Honor," she said, "it's clear that Mr. Bennett's representation of my client's finances was not only misleading, but deliberately false. Mrs. Bennett is not unstable. She's not unemployed. She's a corporate leader with a consistent, documented income and professional credibility." A heavy silence settled over the room, not of anticipation, but of reckoning. Evelyn sat tall, her heart pounding in her chest like a slow drum. She didn't look at Graham. She didn't have to. She could feel it, his panic, his fear, the slow, crumbling collapse of his narrative. Judge Clark adjusted her glasses and turned her attention to the thick file in front of her. She glanced at Graham, then at Evelyn, then down at the documents that had reshaped the room: financial records, social media screenshots, notes of neglect. And now, the CEO confirmation letter, the tremor that split the courtroom's ground beneath them. When the judge spoke, her tone was calm, but laced with steel. "The court has thoroughly reviewed all materials and testimony," she began, her voice, steady and unshakable, sliced through the tension like a blade. "Mrs. Bennett has consistently demonstrated, through verified documentation and first-hand accounts, that she has acted in the best interest of her child from the very beginning." Evelyn held her breath. "She has shown professional excellence, emotional clarity, and a structured commitment to creating a stable, nurturing environment for her son." Across the aisle, Graham shifted in his seat. Ava's confidence had completely vanished. She sat stiff and silent, her fingernails digging into the strap of her purse. The judge continued. "Conversely," she said, her gaze landing squarely on Graham, "Mr. Bennett has failed to provide credible evidence of emotional or financial stability. He has not successfully challenged the claims of neglect, nor has he shown readiness to assume primary parental responsibility." Then she paused, and her next words cut deep. "Additionally, Mr. Bennett's baseless insinuation about paternity without proof reflects a disturbing pattern of deflection, irresponsibility, and emotional manipulation." Graham opened his mouth to object. The judge didn't flinch. She raised her hand firm and final. "My decision is as follows." The room froze. Full legal custody will be granted to Mrs. Evelyn Bennett. Mr. Graham Bennett is awarded visitation as structured in the court-approved schedule. He is also required to contribute to child support, including 50% of all medical and educational costs based on a revised financial review. Evelyn's breath caught. Her fingers curled into the edge of the bench, quiet shock mixing with relief. It was real. Then one final blow, not from Evelyn, but from the bench. Judge Clark turned to Graham. Her voice didn't rise, but its weight filled the room. "Mr. Bennett, I urge you to reconsider what it means to be a father. Not in terms of what you think you're owed, but what you're responsible for. Being a father is not a title. It is a duty." Graham blinked, as if hearing those words from someone he could neither dismiss nor discredit. He looked stunned. But Evelyn. She didn't need to say a word. The truth had already spoken. Just as Judge Clark prepared to close the hearing, she added almost casually, yet with the gravity of a sealed door, "If Mrs. Bennett wishes to pursue additional damages related to emotional distress, she has the right to do so in a separate civil suit." Then bang the gavel struck. And just like that, It was over. Not with shouting, not with chaos, but with quiet justice. Evelyn didn't move at first. She wasn't frozen from shock, but from something deeper. A release, a deep exhale of vindication, a rising warmth she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Caroline reached over and touched her arm. "You did it," she whispered. Evelyn turned to her, tears brimming. "No," she said softly. "We did it." Across the aisle, Graham bolted to his feet, nearly knocking his chair over. His face flushed, his jaw clenched in disbelief and rage, but there was nothing left to control. No leverage, no stage. Ava didn't follow. She stared straight ahead, as if trying to undo the last 10 minutes with sheer will, but justice had spoken, and it hadn't chosen her. Evelyn gathered her files, straightened her back, and walked out of the courtroom. Not as a victim, not as a shell of who she used to be, but as someone reborn. As soon as she stepped into the hallway, a wave of emotion broke free. Tears rolled down her cheeks, tears of triumph, of sorrow, of survival. "Thank you," she whispered to Caroline. Caroline smiled, simply, "Now go live the life you've built." Behind them. Graham stormed out, muttering to himself, defeated. Ava followed, moments later, her eyes vacant. Outside, cameras flashed. Local reporters had caught wind of the sensational divorce case. Evelyn shielded her face, gave no comment, and kept walking. In the corridor, Julia was waiting. She opened her arms without a word, and Evelyn melted into her embrace. It was done. The fight, the courtroom, the proving, and now, she could begin. "I can't believe we made it," Evelyn whispered. Julia smiled through tears. "You made it. You stood up for yourself and your son." In the weeks that followed, Graham tried to reach out. He offered empty apologies, suggested they reconcile, hinted at halting the divorce for Noah's sake. But Evelyn saw through the charade. It wasn't about family. It was about finances. She declined, calmly, clearly. Any communication moving forward, she said, goes through my attorney. This is about Noah, nothing else. Ava, meanwhile, quietly faded from the spotlight. She publicly distanced herself from Graham, and whispers suggested she'd left town altogether to work on herself. Graham, left without his mistress and the fantasy he'd built around himself, was alone. Evelyn returned to her role at Bluefield Labs, navigating early motherhood while leading with clarity and conviction. True to his word, Colin Hayes issued a national press release, officially announcing her as CEO of Bluefield Creative. The media took notice. Invitations came pouring in, conferences on women in leadership, panels on balancing career and parenthood, articles about resilience in the face of betrayal. Evelyn had become something she never imagined during those long, tearful nights on the kitchen floor. A voice, a symbol, a leader. She built her executive team with care, emphasizing diversity, equity, and ethical decision-making. And in every meeting, every keynote, every quiet, mentoring moment, she remembered the lessons from her parents: kindness, humility, and courage without cruelty. Her story became a headline. From heartache to headlines, from abandoned to unstoppable. And as the seasons passed, Evelyn found something she never thought she'd feel again: rhythm, peace, and a life entirely her own. Noah was thriving. His laughter filled every quiet space in Evelyn's home, especially when Julia made one of her famously ridiculous faces. His eyes sparkled with joy. His hands reached out in wonder. He was growing fast, and with each giggle, Evelyn's heart expanded. Despite everything she had endured, her capacity for love hadn't diminished. It had deepened. In time, Evelyn cautiously opened her heart again. She met Daniel Wu, a marketing strategist she connected with during a conference in Boston. He was thoughtful, grounded, and kind. He listened without interrupting, respected her boundaries, respected her. It was nothing like the whirlwind that once swept her into Graham's arms. This time, it was steady and real. Meanwhile, Graham was unraveling. Between child support payments and a trail of failed business ventures, he was forced to abandon his lavish lifestyle. Gone were the penthouse views and imported wines. He now lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. His name popped up occasionally in local tabloids linked to bar fights, unpaid bills, and declining ventures. But Evelyn felt no triumph in his fall, only peace. She was free. That was enough. One quiet evening, as she rocked Noah to sleep, her phone buzzed. Graham. For a moment, she nearly ignored it, but something urged her to answer. His voice was thin, fragile. Evelyn, he slurred. I messed up. I lost everything. Ava's gone. The investors pulled out. I just want to see my son. Evelyn closed her eyes, steadying herself. If you'd like to see Noah, she said gently, we can arrange it through the court, but I do hope you get the help you need. There was a pause. Please don't hang up. She ended the call calmly, quietly. She would not go back. Noah was her North Star now, and forward was the only direction she allowed herself. A few Sundays later, Evelyn held a small baptism for Noah at the neighborhood church. It was simple, heartfelt, surrounded by friends, Julia, Daniel, Colin Hayes, and a few close family members. They gathered not just to bless a child, but to celebrate survival, love, and beginnings. Graham was not invited, but he came anyway. He hovered in the back pew, distant, silent, as Evelyn cradled Noah in her arms and stepped toward the altar. For a brief second, their eyes met. Sadness flickered in hers, but she stayed composed. Focused on the only thing that mattered, now her son's future. After the ceremony, Graham approached. May I hold him? He asked, voice low. Evelyn hesitated, then, with grace, handed Noah over for a brief moment. Graham's hands trembled as he looked into his son's eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. Evelyn said nothing. She simply reached out, took Noah back, and nodded to Julia. Let's walk him out. There were no promises, no second chances, but Evelyn had made a choice. One day, when Noah was old enough to ask questions, she wanted to tell him that she had acted not out of anger, but out of dignity. The final divorce proceedings came and went quickly after the custody ruling. When Evelyn signed the last document, she didn't feel sadness, only relief. Caroline smiled warmly and said, You stayed true to yourself. That's something most people never do. And Evelyn finally believed her. Months passed. She rose higher in her role, balanced bottles with board meetings, late-night feedings with national interviews. And then, one morning, she found an envelope in her mailbox. No return address, just her name. Inside was a letter from Graham, handwritten, regretful, apologetic. Too late. She didn't read it fully, just folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. She didn't know if she'd ever open it again. For now, her heart belonged to one thing, the present, her son, her work, and a life she had built, not from what she was given, but from what she refused to give up. That fall, Evelyn Bennett was named Entrepreneur of the Year by a national women's leadership organization. Her story wasn't just one of survival, it was one of becoming. The ballroom at the Hyatt Regency shimmered beneath golden lights. The stage was set. The air buzzed with applause and admiration. Evelyn arrived wearing a classic black gown, elegant in its simplicity. Her grace turned heads, not because of extravagance, but because of presence. Julia had taken little Noah for the evening, whispering, Go shine. I've got him. As Evelyn stepped onto the stage to accept her Entrepreneur of the Year award, her past came rushing back. Graham's cruel laughter, Ava's mocking tone, the courtroom, the fear, the isolation of pregnancy. But now she stood, unwavering. She thanked her late father and her mother, Grace, for teaching her how to endure with dignity. She dedicated the award to Noah, her little light in the darkest nights. Your life, she said, voice trembling, gave mine new purpose. In the months that followed, Evelyn found herself settling into a life that once felt like a distant dream. She traveled for conferences, built groundbreaking campaigns, and returned home to bedtime stories and sticky kisses. Her bond with Daniel deepened, not rushed, not perfect, but respectful and real. They built something together slow, strong, and safe. Bluefield Creative thrived under her leadership, Their work won industry awards, attracted global clients, and redefined what it meant to lead with empathy. Evelyn made it her mission to mentor young women, especially single mothers. Her message was clear: you're not broken. You're just becoming Graham. Meanwhile, faded into the background. He attended therapy sporadically. He made efforts to follow the visitation schedule. Evelyn allowed it because Noah deserved the truth, not a curated version of family, but she had no interest in reconciliation. Her peace had never required his apology. Then, one afternoon, a new message appeared in her social inbox from Ava Whitmore. "I'm sorry for everything. I wish you well." Evelyn stared at it for a long moment, then let it go, unanswered. Some chapters, she'd learned, are better left closed. Soon after, Noah turned 1. Evelyn hosted a modest party in their condo, with pastel balloons, cupcakes, and the joyful chaos of people who truly loved them. Noah smashed his cake with chubby fists. Laughter filled every corner of the room. Julia, Daniel, Caroline, Colin. They were all there, family, not by blood, but by choice. Evelyn stood quietly for a moment, taking it all in, from the woman who once sat in silence, broken and afraid, to the woman now leading with confidence, grace, and joy. She had made it. This was the life she fought for, and it was finally hers. Weeks later, Evelyn sat in her office at Bluefield Creative's new downtown headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Chicago skyline, bright and buzzing with possibility. She pressed her intercom. "Yes, Ms. Bennett," her assistant said. "Actually," the assistant corrected quickly, "Ms. Campbell. I keep forgetting. Sorry." Evelyn smiled. "It's fine. And yes, please schedule a meeting with the design team for Monday afternoon." "Of course, Ms. Campbell. Also, congratulations again on landing the Cint Technologies account. You're doing incredible things here." Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Outside, the city gleamed alive with motion and promise, and she sat there, not as someone who had survived, but as someone who had risen. The afternoon sun poured through her office windows, casting a golden glow across the room, a quiet, steady metaphor for her own horizon. Evelyn Campbell had faced betrayal, endured humiliation, felt the sting of abandonment, and still she had risen. She was no longer just someone's ex-wife, no longer the woman whispered about in courtrooms or pity-filled gossip. She was a mother, a CEO, and an unshakable force of her own making. Thank you for walking with us through this emotional journey of heartbreak, courage, and transformation. Evelyn's story is more than just one woman's triumph. It's a reminder that no matter how dark the night becomes, the morning always comes, and with it, the chance to begin again. She didn't just survive, she thrived. She redefined success on her own terms. She found strength in single motherhood, joy in honest connection, and pride in a life built from clarity and self-respect. Her journey urges all of us to look inward, to trust that our worth isn't defined by who hurt us, but by how we rise after the fall. And maybe, just maybe, her story can serve as a spark to help someone else find their voice, take that first brave step, and light their own way forward. If Evelyn Campbell can reclaim her power in the face of cruelty and doubt, so can you. So can any of us. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Together, we keep these stories alive. And remember, your courage could be the light someone else is waiting for. Thank you for being a part of Evelyn's incredible journey.